How are you, man? One empty seat, huh?
All right, come on, let's go. 5:30.
Chief Porter's gonna have to fill that one. What are you running for, bud? Yeah. Nothing. Yeah. Really, right, really.
No.
Use your chief voice, Ryan.
Everybody hear me okay back there?
I'm sorry.
Everybody, hear me okay? Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm your Chief of Police, Ryan Porter. Welcome to the Canaan Police Department and welcome to Candidates Night. Since 2001, Meet the Candidates Night has been sponsored by the Canaan Police Benevolent Association. It's an opportunity for citizens of Canaan to meet and learn more about those who desire to serve our town and learn about what they, or where they stand on important issues. Tonight's moderator is Dale Barney, who graciously volunteered his time to be here tonight, so thank you, Mr. Barney. Thank you. We want this event to be informative, civil, and non-hostile. We will allow candidates up to 5 minutes to give their opening statements and tell us about why they are running for the position that they are. Citizens will be given an opportunity to ask respectful questions of the candidates, and they will be given 3 minutes to respond. We ask that participants and attendees do not engage in a back and forth to avoid interruption, and in the interest of time, we must respect these boundaries. The CPBA has provided coffee and popcorn, and there's water back there, so please help yourself. And thank you again for coming to our event. We hope that this event will help you make informed decisions on Tuesday when you cast your votes. We appreciate you guys coming.
Thank you, Ryan. Chief Porter.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm Dale Barney, town moderator. And so tonight we're gonna have a 2-part format. We're gonna have the folks that are running for not selectmen, but other offices. They're going to have like an opening statement. And then we'll have questions and answers to that. And then we're gonna ask the 2 selectmen that are the 2 selectmen candidates that are running to come up and give their presentation, and then I'll be answer questions and answers at that. Sound good, everybody?
Sure.
Okay, we're gonna start down at my far left. It's Cindy Neely. Cindy, you can just talk loud and state what you're running for and if you have anything to say about that.
I do.
Okay, great.
My name is Cindy Neely. I'm running as a trustee of trust funds. It's a position I've held for a number of years. I couldn't even count how many. But your trustee of trust funds is responsible for approximately $3.5 million of town funds, school district funds, perpetual trusts, for the safekeeping and accurate administration of those monies. It's a job that is similar to the one I had when I was in the banking world, understanding fiduciary duties and handling money. So I'm happy to participate in my town through holding this office. And I'm especially happy that we have a complement of capable trustees, Colleen Johnson and Nick LaValle, to complement the 3 trustees who hold the position.
Absolutely.
I think what we'll do is, so it's fresh in everybody's mind, while we have a question and answer session now, so that, does anybody have any questions for Cindy? About the trustees and trust funds? Very good. All right,
Good job,
next up,
Cindy.
Tom.
I'm Thomas Opel. I had the honor of being elected 3 years ago to the planning board. And I'm running for another term. Actually, first elected to the planning board 3 years ago. I think I did a 1-year term in there someplace. But I think planning board's doing a lot of very good things right now. We are with several members of the board. Dan Collins is a select board representative. Corinne Morris, our state representative, is also on the planning board. We're looking at updating the master plan, which has not been updated in a few years. And one of the things we're gonna work very hard at is trying to get a lot more town input. We haven't really had a survey of the town, I think in close to 10 years. So, and we're trying to look at the master plan update as an opportunity to promote the town and working with the Economic Development Committee that the current select board saw fit to create last fall. I think, we're working hand in hand with that organization. I also serve on that Economic Development Committee. And I think we've made some real progress in terms of coming up with some ideas to help promote the town, to help promote downtown, and work to try and bring jobs and retail and commercial activity to Canaan, to complement some of the great things that are already going on, like Christmas in Canaan and the farmers market. I hope to win your support again this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas.
Questions for Tom? Planning board.
Great.
Wait for you, we'll wait for you, Mike.
Great.
All right, and there'd be no questions, and we'll move on to John.
All right, I'm John Bergeron. I'm Chair of the Planning Board and been doing this for 20 years or so. And what we do in the Planning Board is the master plan, as Tom covered, and the bulk of our business is subdivision. So if you want to take a lot and cut it into 2 or 20, whatever number of lots you need, that's a formal process, very regulated by the state. We have to do things in a certain manner. And you come to us with a surveyor and we do that. Other things we do are lot mergers. You've got 2 lots and you'd like to squeeze them together and have 1 lot for perhaps to save some tax dollars. That's another thing we do. We also oversee a lot of ordinances which come to you at town meeting, but things like amendments to the floodplain or the building code or the Drinking Water Protection Act, the wind farm. We have a wind farm ordinance if some major development wants to come in. So we have a variety of these ordinances, and we go through the process of looking them over occasionally and deciding whether or not they need to be updated, and if so, updated, or if we need other new similar ordinances to control a specific aspect of town. And we have reasonably high turnover in the planning board. There's probably someone who leaves us every year, so think about joining us. We probably will have an opening this year. I have no idea who, but typically we have at least 1 opening, and we welcome you to come join us. We do ask that you be able to read a map. That's probably the biggest thing. And so we kind of enjoy our work and we'll keep at it.
Thank you.
Any questions for John? Yes.
Sort of just a general question. Can we specify the term, how long each term is for Tom and John and Mike and Nick, please?
Yes, who wants to answer that?
I'm 3.
I'm 3.
And I'm 3 as well.
For a 1-year term.
1-year term for the planning board, 2 years for the trustee of the trust fund.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on.
Dale, I don't have a question,
Oh.
but someone that on Zoom said it's not working.
It's all set.
You got it?
Yeah, it's all set.
Okay, great.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
All right, good evening, everybody. My name is Michael Reese, and I'm running for the planning board for one of the 1-year terms. There's a 3-year, and then 2 1-year terms. I'm for one of the 1-year terms. My wife and I bought property in Goose Pond, in Canaan on Goose Pond in 2001, and we've lived here full time since 2009, late 9, early 10. I started attending planning board meetings in January of 2022, just as an observer. I was curious to see if it was something that I might be interested in doing down the road, or if I maybe had something to add. to contribute. And 3 months later, in April of 2022, I got asked by the existing planning board at that time to become an alternate. And an alternate on the planning board, what you attend meetings, you participate in conversations, discussions, but you don't vote unless there is a standing member that is absent that night for some reason. And then the chairperson can ask you to stand in and vote for that meeting only. And so I did that for a year. And then in April of 2023, a standing member had to drop out. John just mentioned this happens about once a year. Somebody dropped out, and then I was, as an alternate, I was asked to fulfill the rest of that term for the rest of the term, which expires on Tuesday. So that's the year. So I've been at the planning board for the last 2 years as an alternate and then as a full member. It's not a breezy responsibility. There's a lot to the planning board. You know, there's educational webinars to attend, there's ordinances and regulations, there's state laws. It's fairly involved, and but I have enjoyed it, and you know, I'm looking to get elected to serve another term. Other things about me that I think are pertinent, I'm in the middle of my second 3-year term on the budget committee, and those I was elected to. So I've had the great honor to work with some very accomplished, astute, and very committed people on the budget committee. That's been a really interesting experience. I've also, for the last 14 years, been president of the Goose Pond Lake Association, and that's because no one else wants the job. But you don't really run for that. But it means that I do newsletters and manage the water qualities program, the Lake Coast program, the Weed Watcher program, monitor the loons, whatever. It's pretty involved. I'm also a volunteer at the senior center. So I think that, you know, taken in total, those things kind of demonstrate that I have a real commitment to the community and have some energy and willing to serve. So I'm looking for your support. I appreciate it. If for some reason I'm not elected, then my warm wishes and support to the other 2 candidates, Nick and Brian, who's not here. I haven't met Brian, but hey. Oh, you're Brian? Oh, okay. Well, if I don't get it, you have my support. Thank you.
Any questions?
Can I ask you?
Yes.
Yeah, this is more of a statement, but I will say, Michael, even when he was just the alternate, was already taking minutes for the planning board meeting, which is a really arduous job, just keeping track and then turning it into an actual draft of the minutes that are required by state law. And speaking as someone who was elected secretary of the board, I really do hope Michael gets reelected. Just a personal.
I'm just the apprentice.
Yes, in the back.
Hey Dale, just because Mike brought it up, can the other candidates that spoke earlier just say what other committees or boards are on in town as well? So
Sure.
it's important.
Anybody else? Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Cindy.
I'm the president of the Friends of the Canaan Town Library. I served as a library trustee for 3 4-year terms. And I find the Friends group a wonderful way of meeting new people, of being an advocate for a vital community resource. So that takes a fair amount of time. When the listen dinners were done, I was a team captain on one of the listen dinner evenings in Canaan. That's pretty much it.
Budget committee?
Not anymore. Yeah, that was too much like work.
Tom.
As I mentioned, I actually chair the newly created, well, it's now 6 or 7 months old, Economic Development Committee, as well as serving on the planning board.
And then I'm on Planning Board, Historic District Commission, Meeting House Preservation Committee, Budget Committee, and I think that's it.
And like you already said.
And I also have been on the Economic Development Committee with Tom since its inception, although I've missed the last few meetings for vacation and conflicts and whatnot, but hope to get back in the saddle. But so I'm on that too.
Thank you. Questions? Any other questions?
Could Brian join us up here? Since he's running for.
Yeah, Brian, yeah.
Gonna bring you on,
While we're, go ahead, Nick, go ahead and do your thing.
Yep, so my name is Nick Valley. Been living in Canaan for 6 years now. Been involved with the town in these committees for about a year and a half. It started with the library trustees, which I was elected to last year for a 3-year term, so if the names seem vaguely familiar, that might be why. I'm running for 2 different boards this year. Both of them are to fill vacancies that had occurred in the last year. The first one is trustees of the trust fund. Cindy did a nice job outlining what the trustees do. Last year, when the town sent out the email looking for assistance, I threw my name in the ring and was selected by the select board to fill out that term. And so I'm running for the last 2 years of that term to continue with the group. Over the last few months, we've had a few meetings where I've gotten to learn the ropes of the group, and it's Cindy's a wealth of knowledge. She's been around the town for a while, knows all the different committees, so it's been great learning from her. And I wish to continue with that. I'm also running for a 1-year position with the planning board. One of the current members is deciding not to run for the remainder of that term that he was selected to fill last year, another vacancy, but I've been with the the planning board for a year and a half as an alternate. Again, Tom and John did a great job outlining what the planning board does, so I don't need to expand any more on that, but I've got, again, learning from them over the past year and a half, all the tasks and responsibilities with that group. It's been a great learning experience, and I think being elected would be a smoother transition, as I have kind of understand how the group works, and yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Nick. Yep.
Any questions for Nick specifically? Okay, we'll move on. Go ahead, you're up.
I'm Brian Armbruster. I'm not quite as old as the sitting president. I may look at it. All right, leave me laughing. I should sit down now. Anyway, I'm been in town since 2010. Grew up in Portsmouth. Had a 26-year Air Force career after I left Portsmouth. And then another 22 years with the Corps of Engineers. Ended up at Krell and right here in our little neighborhood. Retired 2 years ago. Thought I was gonna have time to work on boards and be here in town, but my parents in Florida had different ideas, so that finally has come to pass in the last 2 years, and so I've got time for the town now. We're not going back and forth to Florida anymore. I have been helping out from time to time with the master planning board for contingency type of operations, which has been very enlightening to figure out possibilities of what might happen, such as flooding and so forth here in town, and what we have for contingencies with the state and with federal, and how to do that. And working with these guys has been enlightening. Like I said, I've got time. I realize now that I need to be able to read a map. Some of my Air Force training helped me with that. I worked in pilot training during Vietnam, and so we can at least read maps from above. We'll see how it does on the ground. You may have seen me walking around. I do a lot of walking. I also, if you've seen a bunch of aluminum cans down here at the stop sign on 118 and Orange Road, that's me. I pick up the trash on Orange Road and leave it there, and the town is nice enough to pick it up periodically. So that's a help. That's one of my things I try to do. I'm looking for the 1 year on budget committee and on the planning committee. So during the Air Force career, the reason I think that I may have something to add to it, like I said, I've been working a little bit on the master planning, the contingency thing, and working with operations in the Air Force. You work on a lot of contingency type of things. What if this happens? What are you going to do? You have to respond quickly. And obviously, with all the water and the changes in the planet going on, the town, all the towns need that kind of forward thinking. You need time and people that are devoting their time to it to try to work through it. There's a lot of moving parts. And I think I've got time to help with that now that I'm retired and, like I said, not going back and forth to Florida to help parents. Yeah, I think that wraps it up. Any questions? Ma'am?
Can you elaborate on how you helped with the master plan?
Pardon me?
Can you elaborate on how you helped with the Canaan master plan?
I think he's confused the terminology. It's the emergency management plan.
Has the hazard planning.
Okay, cause that.
It's a
that-
different plan. The fire department is the primary driver on that.
Yeah, that's not the master.
It's not integrated into the master plan, no. Maybe it could be.
One works the other way.
Yeah.
both of them.
It's like I said, there's a lot of moving parts that come together. I think that's part of the world we live in today. It's, you can't just put your head in the sand because someone's gonna kick sand in your face, right? So a lot of moving parts. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, very good. Any other further questions at all, or any statements from any of the candidates? Anything else that we want to talk about? Yes.
Just like to thank them all for, the jobs they've done and running. It takes a lot of time. Thank you.
Yeah.
I use the town. Excuses.
Yeah, you're up here, you're sitting at the table, you can be excused if you'd like, and we're gonna call it.
Tom.
And the
Good.
candidate for selectman, if you come on up, have a seat.
Yes, John, saved it for you, John. What do you want, any spot in particular?
No. Any thought?
In the middle. I don't think we'll have, any takers?
Yeah, I'll take it.
And if you would, Mr. Bergeron behind you, please. Scott?
All right, so, we have two candidates obviously running for selectmen, and so we're gonna start with opening statements. And then we'll probably have, questions and answers for both candidates or whatever after both statements. Okay, so we'll start off with, on the left first, Dan, if you wouldn't mind going first, that'd be great.
Sure.
And then we'll follow up with Scott, so go right ahead.
Sounds good, okay. Nice, glad to see everybody out and about, thank you all, appreciate you coming. Hopefully tonight's an informative night for everyone. I would just say, that, 3 years ago when I ran for select board, I made an effort to speak to as many people in town as I could, given the fact that we were in the middle of COVID. Believe me, I wish I could have shaken a lot more hands and knocked on a lot more doors. One of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to see if the majority of the people that I spoke with shared my same concerns. And overwhelmingly you did. We spoke about transparency or the lack thereof. We spoke about accountability or the lack thereof. We spoke about taxes, road conditions, our town-owned buildings, among other things. 3 years ago at candidates night, I promised the community those issues would be my main focus. I stand here tonight, 3 years later, prepared to show you that that's exactly what I've done. To name a few examples of my efforts. One of the first things that I did was I fought and advocated to keep Zoom access available to our community. They were getting ready to go away. And I fought to keep that available for us, not only for the select board, but for the budget committee as well. Now, not only are the select board and the budget committee meetings available on Zoom and recorded for you to view whenever you're able to, but the planning board and the capital improvement committee meetings are now available on Zoom as well. I advocated for our select board meetings to be held here in this room, not the little room underneath the library that is now Monica's office. One of the things I realized when I first came on the board, after talking with everybody, we're talking about our taxes, our budget, the assessors, right? So what I did was I went and I personally met our assessors. His name's Todd. I've got his name in my phone, he's got mine in his. And not only did I meet him, but I asked him to be on the agenda and come in and meet everybody else in our community. Before I did that, he had let me know that he didn't recall meeting with select board members at all. He sat here at a public meeting and did a question and answer session for our entire community. That's transparency. I advocated for our auditors to come in and talk to the community. Our auditors said the same thing. They hadn't met the select board. And I don't think it's out of possibly any malicious intent. It just hadn't happened. It wasn't the way the process was working. That transparency hadn't been there in a while. We did the same thing. The auditors came into a public meeting and they sat here and they addressed the public with any questions and answers. It's transparency. You know, I've met multiple times, as many of us are aware, with Mike from Horizon Engineering. He's been here at public meetings, public hearings. I've met with him on the site, literally reviewing plans on the trunk lid of his car. Over the course of a few public meetings after that, I advocated against a proposed change order that saved the town $60,000. We didn't need the change order. And I knew that because I was on the site reviewing the plans with him on the trunk lid of his car. Dave was there with me the first day. He knows we were there. I brought attention to the Goose Pond Dam issue. In one of the subcommittees that I sat on, we were talking about the Goose Pond Dam. I was working at a house on the backside of Goose Pond Road when Michael Reese, who's the chairman of the Goose Pond Lake Association, mentioned to me about the dam project. And I dug into it a little bit and realized that we had had a public hearing, but it wasn't really publicized, so not everybody knew about it. And there was just a handful of people, and the meeting was held at our meeting house. So I advocated to get them back in here, and we actually publicized it, and we filled the room with Goose Pond residents to ask questions and see what was going on in our community. Now, maybe a lot of us didn't realize it. I did not realize it. But the residents who live year-round and seasonally around Goose Pond make up 18 to 20% of our tax base. They're an important part of our community. They need to know what's happening with their land. I would say, and most of you probably realize I could go on and on and on, but we've got 5 minutes. I'm going to do my best to stay in the time frame. That's just my involvement with the select board and just a piece of it. I've got so many more notes tonight that I'm hoping to go over with you guys. That's not to mention the involvement from the time that I sat on the Capital Improvement Committee in the last 3 years. The involvement from the time I've sat on the Budget Committee in the last 3 years. The involvement from the time that I currently sit on the Planning Board. I sit on the committee that's reviewing our master plan and updating our master plan for our community. I will say this, I'm a firm believer, especially now being involved in the process, that after the first 3 years of this commitment, you've just gained enough knowledge to be able to put it to the test. And as many of you have heard me say, I'm also a firm believer that you shouldn't be here forever. I feel like 2 terms is adequate. The first term, you've learned the process, and the second term, you can implement what you've learned and hopefully leave the position in a better place than it was when you got here. I appreciate everyone's support from 3 years ago, and I hope I'll earn your support again this evening. Thank you.
I'm Scott Johnston. I know quite a few of you. I've been around a few years. I grew up in Enfield, product of Mascoma School District. Went on to University of Maine, did 2 years of forest utilization studies. Decided to get married and did a 2-year ag tech associate's degree in 1 year. So I get out of there. And my studies in the forestry, majored forestry, I minored in engineering. Did stadia survey work up there, did blueprinting, map drawing, cartography, and came back here. Wife and I bought the family farm And we had dairy herd there up until 3 years ago when the federal government prices just didn't allow you to make a living at it. Over that time, so we had affordable health insurance. I spent 20 years with RSD Incorporated, either through contract or directly as a driver and office personnel. Went to the town of Enfield, where I was hired as a heavy equipment operator to run the grader. And soon was in charge of doing all of the overseeing the work, the projects coming up. One of the last projects, bigger projects I did was the Lovejoy Brook Road upgrades with the bridge. We had Hanson Bridge do the bridge. I did all of the dirt work there. It was scheduled at $380-something thousand. I came in, exceeded all of the expectations and came in for $330,000. So I've got the experience reading the blueprints, drawing them, working with engineers. We've worked with half a dozen different engineering firms. I've been involved right from the planning through the finished project. I look at my 22 years in Enfield, gave me a lot of insight into the infrastructure for the town. I was primarily highway, but we also worked with water, sewer, grounds, recreation, wherever it was needed to go. And I figured it's time. I retired from Enfield a year and a half ago, so I figured it's time to try to bring some of my experience in the town of Canaan through the selectman's office because of my background with reading, dealing with engineering and bidding and equipment. I was one of the primary equipment purchasers for the public works in Enfield and dealt with employees, everything from hiring, making recommendation, the bad side of it, having to write employee reviews and disciplinary. That's the part I hated. But it has to be done. We need to, in Canaan, from what I see, we need to review a lot of our personnel policies, see that they're enacted across the board with everybody. If we're going to have them, you need to enforce them. Another area, although you might not have heard of it, I went through what's called the Road Scholar Program. It's a federally DOT funded education program that for New Hampshire goes through UNH. And they have 6 levels of it. I made it, I'm level 5 Road Scholar. I was unable to complete level 6 because of COVID. They had, like everything else, had to end that program. Last year, they were really just getting up and going again with it. But that also offers classes, everything from basic, how to take care of a dirt road, pavement, all the way up through management level for selectmen administrators too, for the towns. And I'd like to see this town take advantage of that. And so I think it's my time. Right now, I just feel it's a good time to try to use my experience before I get too old and lose it. And put it to good use. Thank you.
Hey, folks, we're gonna open up now for questions. Anybody have any questions? Yeah, right in front.
Dan, you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, good. First off, thanks for all the efforts that you put in over the 3 years. I've worked with you for the last couple months of things. So,
You're welcome.
so I guess that being said, you've kind of indicated it, but why do you want to go through this for 3 more?
Might be the question of the night, Sal. So it is for the reasons that I stated. I do feel like after the first 3 years, you kind of just got your feet under you and you really understand what you got into. The first year that I was here on the board, chased my tail a lot, sent on some wild goose chases and didn't really learn a lot. Second year I was here, realized that, was able to work with some other people. In my second year on the board, Stephen Freeze was elected And so we started to have a bit of a different dynamic on the board. And, you know, quite honestly, Stephen and I don't think really knew what to think of each other at first. We had a desire to work together and help the town, but didn't really know what each other's thought processes and angles were. And over the course of that year, I think we both developed an understanding for each other that we both have good intentions. We don't always see eye to eye. And I'm okay with that. But, you know, after learning what I have, I think now is the time. You know, this isn't really about any one unilateral person making decisions. This is a collected effort of, you know, I tried to put an estimated number on all of the people that might volunteer. When you start talking about library trustees and all of the groups and committees and organizations, and I would guess there's somewhere around 120 people, give or take. But when you start talking about capital improvement committees, budget committees, and select board, there's 20 or 25 people or so. And we all have worked really hard to get us to where we're at. And I'm looking forward to going forward with what we've started.
How would you describe your current working relationship with your current board members in general? Your relationship with them?
My current relationship, in my opinion, with Stephen and Sadie, I would say is productive. I think that is a good word to describe it. Again, we don't always see eye to eye, and I will tell you that I have been dubbed on our board the long talker. Yep. But I'm the long talker because I ask questions. I don't always take no for an answer. I want to know why I'm taking no for an answer. And I want to know why the answer should be yes. There are a lot of people sitting in this room that I sit on boards and committees with. John, right? Let's take the planning board, for example. Over one of our last couple meetings, I think I took the opportunity to thank everybody I would sit on the board with, because I'm not positive that I'll be there after Tuesday. I'm hopeful and I want to be, but I enjoy working on the planning board. On the planning board, we make progress and we get things done for our community. Like I said, whether it's just changing a word in a land use regulation to tighten everything up and getting everything so it's conforming, right? And everything is on the same page, changing select men to select board. That's a biggie with me. It's the little things like that. When people look at our land use regulations and go on our websites, they see the immediate action of the planning board. And I appreciate that. But one of the things that I often do on the planning board, as John has to sometimes remind me, like, time out for a minute, I want answers. I want to know why I'm looking at this plat map and where I'm supposed to be finding that specific key. That's my job on the planning board. And anybody who sits on that board with me will tell you that I am often saying, wait a minute, if I'm going to be here, I want to learn the process, not just floating through it. So, yeah.
Okay, this is a tougher one. There's been some turnover of key staff that you were involved in hiring recently as the town administrator and the road agents.
Can't hear what you're saying.
I'm sorry. Okay, all right, I could do this. There have been turnover of key staff that you were involved in hiring in the last 2 years, the town administrator and the road agents. What are your thoughts on that?
There's been some turnover of quite a few staff members in the town of Canton, right, over the last few years. My thoughts on it are this. I've owned a business for a little over 27 years. I've owned a contracting business for a little over 27 years. I've had a snow management and winter management business for about 20. And when you sit someone down and you talk to somebody initially for the interview process, what you have to go on is what's you're reading in front of you and your initial interactions. And you hire the person that you think is best suited for the job based on that. And then once you get working with each other, sometimes you realize those people may not be best suited for that position. Good people just the same, not in line for that position. When we hired Ned Connell, our previous administrator, that was done through a hiring committee of residents who reviewed all of the application. There were about 47, if I remember right, applications. They narrowed them down. They presented a few people to the board. Out of the 2 people that were the final candidates, the board as a whole, again, it's not unilateral decisions, the board voted that Ned Connell was the best candidate for the job. We hired Ned. Several weeks into it, we started to realize that this might not have been a good fit. Several months into it, we parted ways. We then contacted MRI, as many of you know. We've had an interim administrator, and I think without going through the process of having Ned here and realizing he wasn't a good fit, we wouldn't have got Jack Wozmak here, which worked feverishly with the board to identify a bunch of things. So I think that's how the process works. Coming to the road agent, I will tell you, when our the road agent, when I first was elected, when he left his position, was relieved of his position. We advertised for the position of road agent. We had 2 applicants. Dave was on the board with me at the time, Dave and Scott and myself. We had 2 applicants. One of them was already a town employee. One of them came to us with what looked like a good skill set. We interviewed both of those people. One of them, we asked him if he knew how much he wanted to make. And he said he wasn't real sure. And we asked him if he knew how much he was making now. And he said, no, I'm not sure. The next guy we interviewed came in, opened up his folder, handed us all some printouts, knew exactly what he needed to make per hour, where he'd been, and what he expected to make 5 years from now. When he left, the other board members and myself looked at each other, and the other board members said, wow, he interviewed better than his papers were. That was the words we said. Then it was months. We never called anybody back. So I started shaking the bush. Why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we? So we called him back. We ended up hiring Bob Cushman. Bob did come here with a skill set, but I will tell you, 3 years into this, I realize a big part of what we do has to be a skill set that matches our community. Community spoke out. It wasn't the skill set that matched it. Bob decided he would go somewhere else. At this point, we have an interim administrator, or road agent, as you all know him. And that's how we got, that's the whole process of those 2 people. I will tell you, when we were considering hiring Bob Cushman, I was the one that spoke up to my other board members, Scott and Dave, and I said, full disclosure, I think you guys should know. I weren't the one that spoke up to you, Dave? Well, anyway,
I wasn't on the board.
Spoke up.
I wasn't part of hiring Bob Cushman.
Understood. So I spoke up to the other 2 board members. My apologies, thought it was you. It was Stephen and Scott. And I said, I want full disclosure that I want you to know that this guy's some half-assed relation of mine. He's my brother-in-law. And I want you to know that before we make any decisions, and that I will abstain from the hiring process. And they asked me, how is he your brother-in-law, Dan? Is he related, blood related, not? And I said, no, he's my wife's stepsister's boyfriend. But just the same, he is. They said to me, I don't think that's a big deal, Dan, and we don't need you to abstain. I didn't abstain, but what I did do was vote third. The other 2 guys voted him in. I agreed. That's how the process worked. A year and a half or so later, he wasn't the right fit for the community. He took it upon himself to resign and go get a different job, and we're moving forward with it. That's my answer.
Thanks. Just one last one for you.
Yeah.
Just what do you see as the major issue? What do you see as the major issues facing Canaan over the next several years, and what are your solutions?
Major issues facing Canaan over the next several years are our equipment needs. Not about equipment wants, it's about equipment needs at this point. We need equipment. We need equipment desperately. We are short-staffed, but we are running ads everywhere you can run ads as a municipality. We are having some success with candidates, but we want to make sure we hire the right people for the job. I feel like equipment, infrastructure, roads, and, I'm happy to get into why I feel like those are our needs as well. They're not just something that I've kind of picked out on. It's all from documentation and working over the last 3 years, realizing that what we all spoke about 3 years ago when I wanted to jump into this is actually where we're at, and we're all right. So it's not like we're all sleeping here in the town of Canaan. We all understand what our wants and needs are. It's just now we finally have some folks here that have assembled and we're all working together. We don't all agree, but we're all working together to come up with a solution to move us forward.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Do you mind if I just have a couple for Mr.
No,
Johnston?
But, yeah, maybe somebody else who might wanna
Um,
jump in.
If somebody else does, but, you know. All right.
So let's, yeah, anybody else want to have a question? Yes, in the back.
I've been hogging the questions.
You need to talk about your this question is for Scott. Could you please talk about your history on different boards and services with the town of Canaan?
Yeah, I moved into Canaan in 1978 when we bought the farm. Around 79, I became member of the fire department. I was on that. I think into the 90s. I didn't keep accurate records. I was deputy forest fire warden for close to 35 years. I spent 15 years on the budget committee. 13 of that, I was either chairman or co-chairman with Dave. And I never got on the planning board. I dealt back and forth with him with the work I was doing. But then my employment, in order to keep my health insurance, I was over the road, so it's hard to be on the committee when you're in Pennsylvania, Ohio, or Canada. And helped out numerous times with different, I was Lions Club for a number of years. I just lost track of everything. That if somebody needed something, I tried to help out.
Further questions?
Dan, do you mind if we ask questions of each other as well?
No, we'll save that for the end,
Okay.
okay? We'll take audience now first. Go ahead in the back.
Okay, I just wanted to jump back on the personnel policies. The first Scott, are you aware that the current select board is in the process of reviewing and updating personnel policies? And can you clarify what you meant on your printout about progressive disciplinary policies?
My experience in Enfield, we had it. Unfortunately, it was like 64 pages long, which was too long. But one of the things that I brought in that they were missing out on was step one was a verbal warning. And I had an employee that they told me that I had to do a written warning on, and I asked them, where is record of the verbal warning? And they said it was verbal. And I brought up the fact that, yes, it's verbal, but you need to have a paper here that says on this date, so-and-so received a verbal warning for this infraction. And I hereby understand that I received this verbal warning signed by the employee and supervisor. If you do not record verbal warnings, have document, they never happened. And that was one of the first, we had people out there that, when I moved up into the supervisory level there, that they said, well, we've given them 7 or 8 verbal warnings. When? So I mean, we need to have, if you're going to have a personnel policy, you have to have a documented personnel policy from day one. If you bring somebody in and you classify that as a warning, it has to be documented. On that document, it doesn't have to say, I agree with the warning I received. It has to say that I acknowledge that I received it. Because many times they don't agree with what you're giving a warning on. But everything has got to be documented. Days are gone when you could just tell somebody, leave now. Everything has to be documented. And we're also in the situation, state meetings I was going at, fortunately, we haven't been hit with it. Southern part of the state, there was 2 different towns that hired immigrant workers. They did not know how to do the job. They weren't doing the job. They terminated them. Before they got back to the office, there was a call into the town from a lawyer that they were discriminating against them as an immigrant, not that they couldn't do the job. So these are all things that we haven't seen up in this part of the state yet, but these are all things you have to protect yourself against.
Can I follow up on that a little bit while you're on the personnel stuff? One of the things you mentioned as well on your flyer is, you want to increase town employee training and retention. What are your thoughts on that?
Right off the bat, as far as highway, utilize the Road Scholar program. They start everything from someone who needs to learn how to hold a shovel, right straight through the administrative end, all the way to the top of selectmen. And that program, when we were doing, I know Enfield's still doing it, depending on the class, it was essentially $60 a day for the class. You travel to do the class. Enfield, with the meeting room, this room would classify, if Ryan isn't using it, you could actually sponsor a class here, of which you get 3 free seats out of it. So Enfield, we were able to save money on some of those by sponsoring classes, because they're always looking for places, different areas of state to hold them. And if I've always felt any class you put somebody through, different people learn different things, but anything you can teach them, they've got it. They're not, they shouldn't lose it. I mean, you've got to teach them everything. I mean, a janitor, if he doesn't know which end of the room to use, is useless. So you've got to have training from the top to the bottom.
How about on the retention side? What are your thoughts on how to better retain employees?
I think you gotta, and I don't want to sound like I'm picking on anybody, but you've got to respect your employees. Employees have to respect you. Good leadership creates good followers. And you've got to treat your help. If they do something wrong, don't walk out and holler at them in front of the rest of the crew. Take them aside, talk to them. Hollering at them. I had 2 employees that we hired in Enfield, came from the state. They both, in snowstorms, different times, got stuck, had to have Wrecker come pull them out. And both of them came to me and said, well, you haven't screamed at me. That doesn't do any good. And I mean, your retention on the town end, the town has to pay enough money to keep them from driving next door. We went through that in Enfield. I had a full crew, and within 6 months, I was down 3. They all went to the city of Lebanon for $4 and $5 an hour more money to do the same job. We're a little farther from Lebanon and Hanover driving time than Enfield is. But you've got to have pay that's commensurate with the job they're doing. And if you're going to train people to do that job, you've got to pay them enough to keep them. Thank you.
Tom, did you have?
I just, a couple of questions. First, I want to thank both of you for your service, for what you've done this year, last year, and, Scott, for you for 100 years, in the town and stuff. We're very fortunate to have both of you, for running for the positions.
Thank you.
But I think that we've had quite a few questions that were asked, but I want to just kind of get very specific on what would be, and for both of you, what would be your 3 top things that you would like to see accomplished in, say the first year? That's one part of it. And then the second thing is, how would you go about getting those accomplished? What would be the pros to get them done, or the cons of getting that accomplished?
I'll tell you, my first 3 things are that I'd like to see done are things that I've already involved in working on. I would like to see the funding go through so we can pave South Road. When we started that project, we tore 2 roads up, South Road and Turnpike Road, based on what we collectively understood we had for funding to do that. Then when we got into the process and ready to start receiving bids, we collectively realized that we didn't have a large amount of the funds that we all were told and thought we did. So we regrouped. We focused all our efforts on one road to do that road correctly. That road did have all the culverts replaced. It was ditched properly, had 1.5 inches of base and 2 inches of top coat put on a 2-mile section. And I would like to see the same thing happen to South Road. I want to see the town library fixed and repaired and painted. I was largely in part putting together the RFP, request for proposal, for the work that needs to be done on the library. We've secured contractors and we're hoping that gets started this season. That's something I'd like to see. And quite frankly, I would like to see our efforts in recognizing how to get some better and updated equipment and get on a revolving scale for our equipment purchases and lease programs. I would like to see that happen over the next year. Those are really the 3 big ticket items. There is a million smaller things that I'd like to talk about, and I'm happy to if you want to ask me. I've got a million things, but those are really the 3 big ticket things that I want to focus on.
All right, just to follow up on that, if those are your 3, things, positive things, what are 3 things, or what are the things that are going to stop, the progress of that or being successful in completing those 3, do you think?
What could hold some of those programs back from working in this next year, is voter approval. That really is largely what could hold some of those programs back. However, again, we'll say that that isn't a unilateral decision. This isn't something that Dan Collins came up with and then presented to the Budget Committee and the Capital Improvement Committee and the Select Board. This is something that actually starts from the other end. This process starts with the Capital Improvement Committee. Then the Capital Improvement Committee presents it to the Budget Committee, which then presents their recommendations to the Select Board for our stamp of approval. That's how the process works. So it's important for everybody Tuesday to understand that what we've put forward in the warrant articles isn't the 3 Select Board members sitting in a non-public meeting saying this is what we want to do and this is what I think is best and this is what Sadie thinks is best and Stephen thinks is best. This is what we have gathered collectively from our elected officials that everyone in this room elected on the basis that they think they're qualified to figure out how to move the town forward. Over months of work.
So
Voter approval.
Would you say basically first one is education? Having everybody understand where the process works, and the second thing is the funding for those projects.
I think that is a fair statement, yes. And I will tell you, I think one of the things that we're doing now that hadn't been done previously, for whatever reason, is we are trying to educate the public more. I mean, 3 years ago, I went back and looked at some meeting minutes. And I looked at meeting minutes. I guess I started just for this particular one in 2019, although I have reviewed meeting minutes for 25 years. And in 2019, December 31st of 2019, our public attendance was 0. Then I just skipped forward to July. It was 1. October, 1. December, 1. December 29th of 20, 1. Then we skip forward to July 20th of 2021. We had 16 people here. Then April 5th of 22, we had 22 people here. The 19th, we had 40 people here. And 55, 29, 32, 21, 20, 24, 34, 11, 40, 32. That's education. It's accountability and it's transparency. And with the more people that come to public meetings, the more people are educated when they go home, who can talk to their neighbors. And we can all vote what we need to vote in that has been collectively decided on from our elected officials to help Canaan move forward. You are right. Education and funding. I agree.
But I don't think we need to be at each meeting in order to be educated.
I don't think you do either, right? So we've got web pages. So our web page has been updated. We do flash emails, and on those flash emails, I happen to not right this second, but I mean, if anybody received the flash email yesterday, it's pretty informative. We're educating people on what we're doing. We have selectmen's reports that go out just about every week about what the select board is doing. So if you haven't attended the meeting that we moved from 5 to 6, and you haven't attended the meeting that we moved from the little tiny room to here so you could actually be here, or you weren't able to look at it on Zoom that wouldn't have been here until we advocated for it, and you weren't able to actually take the time during the week to go and watch it in the middle of the night because it's on YouTube, just in case all of you missed all of that, we're doing a selectmen's report in our town email every Friday as well. It's transparency.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Scott, same thing?
Yeah, biggest concern, biggest part of your budget outside of the schools is your highways.
Right.
Anybody driving on the dirt roads right now knows the problem that we're in. I'm not going to point a finger that anybody was malicious or anything. It was in an effort to save money, that unfortunately the material that's been put down on these roads for the last 7-8 years was never received engineering testing. It needs to be proctor tested, sieve tested to know what you have. Sieve testing tells you if you have a silt content, which doesn't allow the water to leave. Proctor testing tells you if you can get compaction in that material to hold the loads up. We need to evaluate. Dale's chasing his tail right now, just trying to catch up with what's breaking up. We need to evaluate, we need within the budget, what money they're given. You chase the worst of the spots and you do that every year. Enfield, that when I started, we had areas that I had to spread backing up because you couldn't drive through the mud. And you hit the worst spots. Next year, you hit the worst spots. After a bit, it's not an overnight fix. Those worst spots get tied together and they get corrected to where they're manageable. We can't afford to remove what was put down there bad. All we can do is try to make it better. And we need the equipment to do it. We went through a spell with no mechanic. The equipment shows. Any piece of equipment that's ever been run and worked is going to break down. You need to be maintained. If you don't have that mechanic, you don't have that position, you end up getting Band-Aids and then it just keeps getting worse. We need to evaluate where we're going. We need to evaluate the equipment on the highways. With regards to South Road, I don't know what's in the budget. Haven't been through to see what they have allotted. One of the ways of doing that, get your base so it's a competitive, a engineering standard base that will carry the weight. Put down 3 inches of base coat. Next year, put down your 1 inch of top coat on it. You can go that one winter and get by with it on it if you need to spread that cost out rather than just say we don't have any money or we don't have enough, so do something else.
Can I just interfere just for a minute? What about geotextile fabrics and stuff, the engineering, fabrics for basically the roads before you put the asphalt down? Any thoughts on?
I've used them. They're great. As long as you know what the load rating, which you're planning on put on the road, because geotextiles carry a load rating. They work. South Road, because the way it was done, you can't do it, but you take a road like Blackwater Road, you do a full depth reclamation grind. They go 8 inches deep, you come back in the top 4 inches, they inject an emulsification and grind that in, grade it, roll it, you give it 2 weeks, that actually glues that 4 inches of asphalt impregnated material together. Then you pave on top of it. We did that a mile on Jones Hill, and I did it on 3/4 of a mile on George Hill. Jones Hill, right now, that was like 11 to 12 years ago, and the only cracks are basically where culverts have shifted. Without that injection, that would have been needing pavement by now. Cost? Between grinding a road and just overlaying it, the difference for the most part is having to replace the base layer of asphalt. The grinding part of it is not the expensive part. That's actually one of the cheaper parts to go in with.
But the longevity is.
The longevity is,
What the-
what it does, it gives you uniformity. You get a base, uniform surface. Frost will react on a uniform. I've done a lot of greater shimming over the years. That's one of the things we could do to help buy time on some of these roads. Basically what that will do, it trues it up enough so you can plow it, your pavement, you can salt it, you use a fraction of the salt, your plow scrape it clean. You can go from having to scrape that and chase it for 3 or 4 days to treat it once, scrape it off, and it's done, if you have a good surface. Getting away from the roads, we've got the library that needs attention. I'd like to see that project go through. We've got other maintenance areas in town that we need to look at. One of them, that's a pet peeve of mine, is watching 70-year-old men push a gate open to go to the transfer station when it's a motorized gate. I mean, if we're going to have a gate like that, let's get rid of the liability of them getting hurt, pushing and pulling on it. Let's fix it. I mean, if it's a $5,000 bill to fix it, that's less than a $40,000 hospital stay. If they slip in the weather and fall on it. I mean, we need to do, in my opinion, yes, it takes time. We need to do a townwide evaluation of where we are, where we want to go. You're not going to do it in 1 year. Your evaluation is going to take a while. Enfield on roads, part of my job was every spring and usually midsummer. It would take me 2 to 3 days. And I'd be out there poking along with a pickup, doing an entire highway evaluation. We do the same thing with water and sewer. Do evaluations. Do you have a valve that's sticking up out that plows are going to catch? Do you have one that's sunk that you can't get to? I mean, all of those things you have to take time to do to know, so you're not chasing your tail.
So that's the stuff that you want to see done in the first year. What's gonna stop you from getting that done? What would be your cons of that? What would be the interference part? I mean, the gate is not gonna be a lot of money, as you said. You know, the assessment doesn't sound like it's gonna be a lot of money.
The assessment is, the biggest thing is everybody, I think everybody here wants to see the roads get better. Your budget and your cost is the limiting factor. When it comes to asphalt, I've seen asphalt, when I started in Enfield, we were paying $27, $28 a ton. When I left, we had paid a high of $93 a ton. That year, we got it for around $67, $68 a ton. It's based off from oil prices. When you put out the bid, if you put out the bid April or May, that bid is usually only good for 90 days. Now, sometimes less than that, and then they have a right to raise prices accordingly. Reputable companies, I've actually had them drop their price when oil prices went down. But it's a petroleum product. And
In the back?
All due respect, Scott, it sounds like you ought to be applying for the road agent job instead of select.
Retired.
I did have a chance to read through.
Are you Mrs.?
And I think I've been to 80% of the select board meetings in the last few years. You had a lot of good ideas on it, a lot of really good ideas. Most of which the current board is already doing, whether it's the Economic Development Committee, or there are 2 warrant articles on to try and get more funds for paving roads and for equipment. I hope you're gonna support those.
yes, I drive on them.
I'm wondering. With those ideas, as I say, you know, a lot of them, I can't go through every single one, but a lot of those are being implemented by the current board. So what I'm wondering is, what would you do different?
I don't know, because I haven't read or seen exactly what they're doing, so I can't sit here and say I'm going to do something different. If they're going the right direction, I'm going to support the direction they're going. I'm not looking to come in and tip everything upside down. I'm looking to try to come in, take my experience with budgeting, engineering, highways and all, and try to put it to the benefit of the town and build on some of these. I've been to some of these meetings that there's some questions I've had that in areas that I'm not saying the selectmen didn't do it right. I'm saying there's some areas that they didn't have knowledge in that field to do it. There are other areas, question I asked the other night, the engineers involved should have had it put in as far as a bond on Goose Pond Road for that job that's going on for the dam up there. The engineering specs, when the state set that all up and met with the town. That road, I don't care if it's summer, winter, or spring, there needs to be a bond on Goose Pond Road to protect the town. So if a truck gets on the edge of the road and tears up the shoulder or the edge of it, it's paid for by somebody other than the town of Canaan. And these are all standardized things that they won't bring them up because it means they've got to spend a little more money. But these are all areas that we need to, we need to look at and try to move forward with to get benefit for the town rather than the town having to pay afterwards.
So I've sat here quiet long over the 3 minutes, I'm pretty sure, right? So I didn't come to just sit here and listen. So a few things that I would like to reflect on over the past bit of conversation here, so first of all, I will tell you that I would have hoped that you would have read what we're already up to. And as far as stating that the reason that the road are getting poor quality material was an effort to save money is not true. And not maliciously, it's just not fact. Let's put it that way. That's not fact. The reason the roads are receiving the poor material is because we weren't trying to save money. It's the opposite. We spent $185,000 of our taxpayer dollar on a 135-acre lot of wetlands that we wanted to call a gravel pit. We had driveway permits put in before we even had actually purchased the lot itself. We had loggers clearing trees before the engineers ever stepped sight on the lot. And we were told that the dirt was tested. But I'm going to tell you, we had the engineers set right where you gentlemen are and told us it never had been. Period. End of story. Within the last few months. So we didn't do it to save money. We wasted a bunch of money. We've since went in and reclaimed all of the areas where we were, replanted them, seeded them, sloped them to the proper degrees, and closed the pit. It's not usable. I don't know how that's saving money. The gate at the transfer station. Anybody who has been around me the last three, I see you smiling back there. That is a thorn in this town's side. I have been on that thing continuously for 3 years. We can't seem to get the damn gate fixed. I will tell you, John Coffey, our water department head, and myself. I was over there, John stopped and asked what I was doing and lended a hand. The first year I was on the board, I got sick of watching JR push the thing open too. So I went over and I looked at it. And I said, okay, we've got 30 feet of gate. And when it gets halfway past its open point, it drops down and it has shifted the U-bolts down, so it's binding and it won't work. So between John and I, we got a ladder, we got a jack, we got a ratchet and a hammer. And we picked the tension off the thing, adjusted the U-bolts up where they need to be, and stood there and went and watched the thing close. Then we had electricians come over and test the wiring to see if there was a split in the wiring. It was determined there was. When they chased it back, apparently there wasn't. I'll tell you the history on that thing. We bought a gate for the transfer station, right? That wasn't powered enough, wasn't a big enough motor to open that 30-foot gate. So when it wasn't working, what we did, not me, staff at the time, went over and they sprayed electrical cleaner on it. And it fried the motherboard. So then it sat like that for a long time. So then we went on eBay and we ordered another motherboard, same thing for the same size as the one that didn't work originally. And we went and installed it, and I'll be damned if that didn't work either. Isn't that something? And it burnt itself out. So we've had Twin State garage door over here at least a half a dozen times in the last 3 years. I just signed a $6,000 purchase order for repairs for the thing, and it still doesn't work. We're on it. We're trying.
I guess
There's only just so many
my
hours in a
question
day.
is, I listened to this, and even with the purchase of the land and all that, who is being held accountable for expending those tax dollars?
Right now, the current select board.
Okay.
Because we sit in this seat and it's our responsibility, but none of the current select board or this entire administration was here when that land was purchased.
I'm not,
But-
I just.
Right,
that-
but we're the current administration, so we take the responsibility for it. So we've closed the pit and we are actively accepting bids and proposals to purchase material, adequate material. We're working with our interim road agent to find out what material is best suitable for our roads, how much of it we need. We're working with multiple trucking companies, local trucking companies, to get purchase and trucking prices. So it's something that we have to ultimately take responsibility of. We're the sitting board.
What about the, like the engineering reports and stuff like Scott has said? Is there going to be you know, I know like if you go out to, you know, Twin State or anything like that, they will actually give you a printout
Yeah.
of what the, you know, the makeup of that gravel or that
So-
sand or whatever that you're gonna purchase.
So we did that.
All right, so you've got some.
Yes, we brought the samples of this pit before we made the decision to close it to SW Cole and actually had sampling done.
Right,
testing
but
done.
what I'm saying, you're gonna buy new sand, you know, for the roadway now.
Right.
So you are going to get a certificate of what the makeup of that sand, that gravel is that you're going to purchase, or that you're putting out for purchase.
I
So
would
we're not
say,
gonna-
yeah, you need to, yes, we're gonna, that gravel and material will have been tested as well, but we're not just gonna go buy that from some odd pit somewhere. We're gonna purchase it from Pike or a reputable company like that who actually produces. I'm not saying specifically Pike, but that's one of the places where the trucking companies are getting their quotes. But we're not looking at just going to somebody out in Enfield Center, and, you know, Conkey, I've bought material from him. He has great material for what I needed it for. It was affordable. Not enough good things to say about my experience with him, but I'm not sure it's roads material, right?
That's what I'm saying.
So we're not purchasing it from there. We're working with reputable companies who, what they make is that material for roads.
And you're gonna have a certificate that sand or that gravel or whatever that you're purchasing is going to be part of that bid process.
I would have to say that one of the things that should be done is when you identify where you're gonna get it from, that material should be taken to SW Cole and tested as well to make sure it's not the same thing we've been putting on. Yes,
Okay. So
makes sense to me,
So
right?
that would eliminate the problem of buying, you know, less than perfect equipment or materials.
Theoretically, yes,
Okay, so
Right.
that way you've got a holdback to say, hey, this is supposed to meet these standards.
right.
This doesn't meet the standard. Okay, we're not paying for it.
I would have,
So-
so I agree that it should probably be tested and will be. But I also agree that we all sit here and talk about how great the roads are in every other community but ours. But they're not.
Yeah.
It's New England. It's mud season. However, we all do realize that they are significantly better than ours. And the majority of those towns and townships get the material from the places where we're looking at purchasing it. So that's why the trucking companies we're specifically working. We're not going to just an oddball pit.
But
So
it shouldn't-
yes,
It shouldn't be the trucking, you could have a different trucking, but the gravel that you're buying.
so let me
should
answer your
be-
question. I can't tell you whether it'll be certified or not because it's not a unilateral decision. If the board decides that they want it tested, then I would agree with that and push for it, yes.
Well, what would stop them? I guess that's the question I started with. What's gonna stop us from doing that? I mean, that just seems to make sense that you're gonna spend X amount of dollars for sand and gravel to put on these roads. You already spent, as you said, $187,000 plus all the
185.
expense and all to go through all that.
Yeah,
Okay, what's to stop that from going that? Very simple thing. I'm going to buy.
I'm telling you, in my opinion, nothing,
Well,
but I'm
that's-
not a unilateral decision maker for the town of Canaan.
Well, as taxpayer, I'm concerned about that.
Well, I'm
Okay.
telling you that I'm on board with you as a taxpayer, and as a taxpayer, I agree that we should test and have certified the material that we buy to put on our new roads, yes.
And if you're gonna send out, I need 100,000 tons of sand
Yeah.
And it has to meet this state standard,
Okay,
then that's what you're gonna buy. That's what you're gonna buy, that's what's gonna be delivered. If it isn't delivered, then you're not paying for it. You don't have to go out and do the testing. You just say, this is the stuff that we need, it has to meet this standard, right?
Yes, the only difference I ran into on that is even buying from a certified pit, if there's federal dollars going into a product, I had to get it tested to town.
That's correct.
If there's federal dollars. You might, Canaan might be doing a federally funded project, Enfield doing a federal funded project, Lebanon. If every bit of that was coming from Pike or Twin State, each town still had to have a Procter and Civ test done to that.
Correct.
If there's federal money.
The reason for that is it wants to ensure the quality of the materials
Correct.
that you're buying.
Correct. When they're saying.
I'm on board with you. You're looking at me like I'm not on board with you. I'm sitting here telling you specifically that I agree with you. And as your select board representative, that would be my ask. But I cannot make that unilateral decision for the rest of the board. That's not how the process works.
Wow.
Wow, what? My
That's
question
just
to you is,
basic
wow, what?
One-on-one business. That's just basic one-on-one.
So
business.
I'm telling you, I agree with you. I'm sitting here, Mr. McDermott, explaining to you that I agree with what you're saying and I am on board with that. And as your select board representative, I would want that done. But I'm also sitting here telling you that it is not a unilateral decision, and I can't sit here and tell you what the other board members would decide. It's not the way the process works, Mr. McDermott. I'm telling you, I agree with you. And I think that's what we should do, and I will advocate for that. But I can't answer for Stephen Freeze or Sadie Wells. That's not my job, nor is it my place. I can't.
All right, other questions?
You're welcome.
Thank you.
In the back.
This question is for Dan.
Yes,
You brought up South Road.
yes.
Mistakes were made. The pavement was torn up before you even had a bid in place to then repave it. It's going on 16 months now, and it has not been maintained. It is an absolute disaster for anybody who has to drive on it, especially when Potato Road is closed because it's underwater. How would you prevent that from happening to other roads in town going forward?
I would prevent that from happening with the process that we just went through for several months with the Capital Improvement Committee and the Budget Committee. So we all identified that. We all agree, we all see it. It's not like we're blind to it. But again, I would reiterate, when the initial grinding of both of those roads were done, everybody involved thought there were the funds there to do both of those roads in the same year. The Capital Improvement Committee, the Budget Committee, and the Select Board.
But you did not have a contract in place to have the pavement done before it was torn up, correct?
No, we did not. So after identifying that the funds weren't there, like I said earlier, we had to prioritize one of those roads. Turnpike Road gets more traffic than South Road. That's how that prioritization came about. That's why that road got done first.
And I'm not questioning that, I'm just
No,
questioning.
I know.
What would you do to prevent it from happening again in the future? Because those of us who live on that road,
Mhm.
it's a mess. We have damage to our cars, damage to our property, damage to the roads out in front of our house.
Yeah. What I would say to prevent that going forward, so basically we grind up another road, how do we prevent this same situation? Is
How do you
my
prevent it
answer,
from being 16 months, well, 16 months, it's gonna be months more.
Yeah.
Before it gets repaid. And, we're taxed for being on a paved road, and here we are almost 2 years in, well, 18 months in, and we're still paying the same tax rate.
Yep.
And they're not maintaining the road either. It's a mess. It's anybody who's driven on South Road in the last week and a half, it's a disaster. So my question is, how do you propose that be prevented from happening to other paved roads in town in the future?
I propose that everyone pay attention to the warrant articles and realize that we have warrants in there for additional funding so that we don't run into that same situation when we start repairing our roads from this point forward. We can't magically put money there that wasn't there. But what we have done collectively, the 20 or so of us that have worked months on this, really, is we have put in place and put warrants forth to all of us, yourself included. So when you go in the voting booth, we can all make sure that that doesn't happen. And that was done collectively through multiple processes. And that's what I was gonna say. I mean, I've been a part in evaluating road conditions through on-site visits. We've done public surveys. We've had it in our flash emails as well as department head reviews. We've evaluated our gravel pits. And I think all of those things combined with each other is how we make sure that doesn't happen going forward. Because all of those things weren't in place when we ground those two roads like were told that they were.
Have you added into the process, making sure that you have a contract to have the work done prior to tearing up the pavement on the road?
I'm not positive that you can have a contract to pave the road until the road conditions are suitable to be paved. Conditional, that's right.
But at least you'd have a starting and ending. I got 1,000 feet of road, 12 feet wide, 16 feet.
Well, we did that on these two roads, though. We did that. That was done. We had a contractor come in and drive these roads and suggest to us what he thought. The contractors suggested to us what they thought was the best avenue for us to take with South Road and Turnpike Road. This isn't something that we just came up with. This is all stuff that the contractors and paving contractors suggested that we do. And then they suggested that we leave Turnpike Road for the amount of time that we did so that that base would set in. The road that we did would set in and take hold before they started putting asphalt on top of it. This isn't something that we just decided was the best process. This is all stuff that we talked with contractors, road agents, paving crews. Over the course of the last 2 years, we've been doing that. I followed the paving crew and our road agent in my car from stop to stop to stop up Turnpike Road and South Road myself. It was part of the process. My apologies if you didn't know that, and it took me till right now in your question to figure that's what you were asking, but it was part of that. All happened before those roads even got ground.
So then why wasn't it completed? If you knew.
I just told you, because we were going off false numbers. So listen, when we did all of that, all of those estimates and numbers were put together on a false number that was presented to the Budget Committee, the Capital Improvement Committee, and the Select Board. And then once the process got going, we all realized, and it's the truth. I mean, look, one of the things that John Hennessy identified with the fire department is that we were $185,000 short of what we were all told we were supposed to have. The reason we didn't get our backhoe last year is because we were $85,000 short in the budget that we were all told that we had in the budget. It was there. We discussed all of this at our town meetings last year. The money that we were all told was in our budget actually wasn't there, Mr. McDermott.
I won't say anymore. I can't believe that we're running an operation that you can't tell us what's in a budget.
Neither could I. That's why I stepped up to the plate to be a select board member, because I weren't part of the process before then. But in the last 3 years, and really in the last 2 years, since we've changed administrators and our process is more inclusive of everyone, we're finding out that a lot of stuff wasn't where we thought it was, Mr. McDermott.
That's a scary thought. That's a scary statement.
Yeah,
It's the truth.
so
True.
there's no guarantee that the articles will be approved. They could be defeated.
Right.
What is your plan to go forward if they are defeated?
My plan is to
Or
get with the
it's like-
Capital Improvement Committee and ask them what their thoughts are. Because the Capital Improvement Committee is the one where it starts and then it's presented to the Budget Committee. And the Select Board is actually the last committee that is approached with the whole process. So my plan is not to overstep my bounds and let the elected officials who are in those roles assume their responsibilities. And collectively, when we start the budget process, that you guys know, it takes months that we all figure it out collectively. This isn't a Dan Collins question or a Dan Collins answer. I'm part of the process, but there's like 20 of us involved in this. This isn't just me. I mean, thank you for thinking so highly of me that I can come in here and explain to 25 people what we're gonna do with our roads and have it happen, but that's not how it works.
I think we haven't discussed tonight, the cost of like putting a CIP together. And I worked on that committee and I think it's a great plan. But the cost of a dump truck is damn near doubled in 5 years. Thank you, COVID.
Time to get them has more than doubled.
But we have to discuss that tonight too, not only that plan didn't work, this plan didn't work, there's a reason. The CIP didn't work real well is because we took so much money for the CIP planning on buying a dump truck. We go to buy the dump truck and it's double the price. So where are we gonna get that money? So we have to take it out of A, put it in B to buy that dump truck we needed. So now A is short. We took the money out of the backhoe plan to buy the excavator last year. And that's why there was no money in the backhoe plan. So we have to discuss that too tonight, not just point fingers, it's this person, that person, this administration. The cost of everything. Go to the grocery store. We've all been there.
Not a question.
Yeah.
I can tell you firsthand, equipment prices
Oh, sorry.
are out of sight. The year and a half ago, I put 2 front tires on a dump truck for just over $400 a piece, virgin rubber. This summer, man, I know exact same size brand tire, he blew one out West Lip. Called up, had tire delivered to him, put it on. And it was $1,000 for that exact same tire in 12-month period. So, I mean, trucks, you're looking now. The last truck I ordered when I was with Enfield, instead of a 6-month turnaround, it took a year and a half just to get the cab and chassis. And then it was another 6 months to get it through the outfitter.
And we also have to discuss the roads. We want roads as good as Hanover and Lebanon.
We don't.
Well,
All it
one,
takes is this right here. It's called money.
one of the things I'd like to elaborate on, I mean, we drive around the area. Unfortunately, Enfield and Canaan, the bulk of Enfield, the bulk of Canaan, has a hard pan substrate under our soil, which when water gets in it, water doesn't flow out of it. You get down to Grafton, now you get into a sandy and gravelly base soil that water can leave. Dorchester, you get up, you crest Walker Mountain, now you're getting into a lot of that gravel, your roads stay better. We're unfortunately in a pocket that has a lot of hard pan and clay substrate that you have to work significant drainage to get everything, because if you want a good road, they'll tell you there's 3 things. You gotta get the water out of the road, off the road, and away from the road. The problem we have is when you have a hard pan base, you can't get that water out of the road easily. Some of the roads in Enfield, we had some short ones. I was able just through the use of crushed stone and a coarse sand to loosen that up enough to let the water squeeze out of it. Those are low volume roads. Your higher volume roads, the only thing you can do is you got to have a stone surface that's got to be depth enough to support the load that's running on it, because you got to squeeze the water out of them. The water is not going to leave freely. Every project I've ever been involved with, from the engineering up, you decide what you're going to do for the project. You get estimates, not necessarily bids, you get a budget estimate of what that project's going to cost. Come spring, when budget was passed, I would put these out to bid. Get the bids, then go back to the office and say, this is the bids. Is the money there to cover this? Because sometimes you had to come up with extra or cut back on the project. At that point, then the bids would be awarded, once we verified that the money was there to do that project start to finish.
The only other thing I got as a comment on is we had the University of New Hampshire came up and did an extensive study on the roads. They did 4 samples on the road and everything else. So when we talk about, the under drainage and all that, that was one of the impetuses of the design of a lot of the new roads or the old roads and rebuilding and stuff. For some reason or somehow, that hasn't been followed. And we see.
You can't afford it.
We can't afford to keep doing what we're doing.
No, and I mean.
Agreed.
Buying that gravel pit, it was sold to us that it was gonna save us money. Did it? No.
Cost us money.
It cost us money before we're done. Everybody's thinking that wanted it in the beginning was to save money, and it didn't, because it was never properly set up, properly tested to know what was there. And hopefully we've learned. And I mean, there are other areas, other pits in the area that have some quality material, but you got to take time to get the test of that material because it changes as they go.
Vicky?
In your time in Enfield, did you apply for federal funds to help with the roads?
Yes,
And were you successful?
sometimes. The bulk of the federal funding in Enfield was FEMA.
Right.
And that wasn't reconstruction money, that was flood mitigation money. There was four projects I was involved with, engineering, and then with COVID, the 10-year plan ran out. FEMA closed all of their offices. They wouldn't extend the deadline, so Enfield, when I retired, was in the process of actually having to redo the 10-year plan before they would look at the immediate plans, because they let everything, federal government.
Yeah, FEMA, okay?
Let me just
One of
say
the-
one more, just on that with FEMA, just because you're hitting a very sore subject. But Cat C is to replace what was there. And the mitigation dollars is going to make it better, stronger, smarter. So, and there is a timeline on that. But what you're talking about is the grants and stuff that were available and stuff.
Yes,
So the repairs are Cat C.
yes.
So-
Repairs are separate from mitigation. Lovejoy Brook Road, that was a mitigation plan because I replaced two 36-inch culverts with a 38-foot span bridge. And I mean, that was all the hard thing when you do that mitigation work. It was 5 years with 7 state and federal agencies doing the planning and the permitting.
Environmental.
They called me the end of February, said all the permits are in place. You have till August 30th to have this job done. So they took 5 years to permit it and gave me 6 months to do it.
Question, yep, go ahead.
To carry on Vicky's question, about funding, in your broadsheet, you mentioned continual research with municipal grant availability. How would you propose to do that research and determine what municipal grants are actually available on a continual basis?
It was never in my job to have to look for them. That was always handled out of the town manager's office. The gentleman that replaced me, he comes from a background, his last 2 jobs, he was a grant chaser. He already got, he got 1 grant to pay towards a truck for Enfield. And he was currently working on another grant. I'm not sure what it was, but we could touch base with him to find out. The grants, if you know where to go, there is a list of what grants are available, and then you have to apply.
So I can speak a little bit on some grants and some FEMA things here.
Talk a little bit louder, Dan.
One of the opportunities I've had over this last several months, a couple times in a few years, but as recently as a few months ago, is I sat in on a meeting in our administrator's office where there were several representatives from the state of New Hampshire, including FEMA, and we discussed the available FEMA money and ARPA money and allocations of those money, and prioritized where those monies should be spent in the town of Canaan. And then we actually went and got in our vehicles and made on-site visits to make sure that what was being discussed with FEMA was actually what they wanted to see, and worked with FEMA to implement some of those programs. So as far as grants and grant retention, and I'm just trying to look at some of my notes here so I don't speak out of turn. One of the things that I've been involved in since being on the board is I sat on a subcommittee to review all of our village town-owned properties. And it was a subcommittee that was looking at community center options. And during that process, we evaluated all of the village properties that the town of Canaan owned, and if they would be suitable for community center development. I brought forth, give me a second, I want to try to find this. I can actually. I brought, we actually, on that subcommittee that we sat on, we worked several months on this. And one of the things that we did is I brought some programs forth to that committee that were from the Community Development Finance Authority. And we sat through webinars and, we sat through webinars and we looked at different options of grant retention for from the Community Development Finance Authority. And we realized at that point that we actually weren't far enough into the process because they require you to kind of have a shovel-ready area. So in working through that, I was able to meet some civil engineers. I spoke with those people about grant writing opportunities. I gathered recommendations and referrals. And that led me to further talks and conversations with the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission. And after my initial talks with that organization, came back to my other board members, the administrator, and decided that it would be best to have that organization come in and give a public overview of their what they offer to communities. We realized that we were one of 2 communities locally that were not involved in the program. And part of what that organization does is identifies grants, wants and needs for grants, research those grants, help you obtain those grants, and then help you oversee how those grants are administered and the funds are spent to make sure that everything is according to the specifications for that particular grant. And I will tell you, I'm very proud to say that since then we have realigned ourselves with that organization. So as far as researching grants already being done. So there's so much more here that I'd like to say. I just don't want to kind of take the whole meeting over.
Question and answer, so go ahead.
Just quickly, I'm curious, Dan bringing up the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission. Scott, are you supportive of the town rejoining that group?
Yes,
Okay.
they have been there and helped communities in the whole Upper Valley for years. And they went through a spell that they were short-staffed. It was hard to get some of this stuff done in a timely fashion, but this is what they are there for, is to help the towns. They get the
I'm
list
curious,
of these
did you know
grants.
that we had rejoined with them?
Excuse me?
Did you know that we had rejoined with
No,
them?
I did
So
not know.
I'm just curious, it sounds like you are sort of unaware of some of the things that have been happening in the town and with the board moving forward. I know on your printout, you had listed a few things like a brochure for the town and doing things like that. And I serve on the planning board and the master plan subcommittee and the economic development committee, and as well as Dan, and we're doing so many of those things, and we're working largely with the select board on many of those projects. And so I'm just wondering why you didn't make yourself familiar with all of these things that have been happening with the board before deciding to run.
Because I have not seen them out there anywhere. I mean, granted, I have very limited computer up where we are, as far as I have trouble just getting
But all of the
email.
meetings are open to the public at all times.
Yeah, I mean, this was the decision I made to step up here this fall. I'm working, like I say, I just retired a year and a half ago with Enfield. My time was spent, I did not have time to come to all these meetings.
I understand.
I-
It's sort of frustrating for people who are doing the work and who are serving on the committees to have it sound like it's being done, because we're working very hard. So-
No, I fully, if you're doing it, I fully support what you're doing.
Okay.
I have not found any of these in what I have seen for publications or outward, anything coming out. I haven't seen any of this stuff. So it's stuff I have an interest in seeing. If it's already being done, I fully support it.
Well, we'd love to have you join some of the committees and be involved and help us make it happen. A lot of it's waiting on warrant articles to make sure funding
Yep.
is coming through. Master plan is a long, it's gonna take us a few years to get it out there. It's all gonna take money and time and effort.
Master plan takes a lot of time every time.
A lot of time, every time. Right now, there are 3 of us working on it. So if you'd like to join the planning board and come in there and help us out, that'd be excellent. But it takes a community, and I would really hope that someone who is stepping up to run would be a little bit more familiar with the fact that we have rejoined these committees, that we are working on grants. The select board has worked very closely with me as a state representative and the Grafton County Executive Council to get ARPA funds. So, these are all things that I just are really important to me to make sure that if you're stepping into this, if you win on Tuesday, that you know what you're stepping into and the work that's already being done.
I look forward to finding out what worked, because that'll make it a lot easier if it's already started.
Yeah.
I can support it rather than say, what can we do here?
So then.
But as I say, I have not seen
And
and
it's different from what the current select board is doing, since we've already started on these things.
I didn't catch the first part of that.
What would you do different if all of the things that you want to do are already being done?
I will support them fully
Okay,
and try to move them forward. I'm not looking to reinvent the wheel. I mean, I just see areas that I think from what I have been able to get for information, I think we need to move in some of these directions. If we're already moving in those directions, great, I fully support going with it.
well, I'd love to see you as a road.
Yeah.
There was a question back there?
I was the back of asking, and we were told that if we wanted to know what was going on in this town, we had to become selectmen.
Okay, well,
By a
that's,
current selectman.
that's incredibly frustrating, but I will say that as not a selectman, I, go to a lot
Not the
of
problem.
other. so.
Okay, any questions for the candidates? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this is for Dan.
Yeah.
In the fall of 2019, you lied to Thermopride to obtain a warranty payment that you were not entitled to. My question is, since then, have you changed your ways, or do you still think this is an okay thing to do?
You're gonna have to fill me in a little more than that, Mike. What are you talking about?
You know exactly.
Well, I'm sitting here telling you that I don't and asking you to elaborate so I can answer your question.
Occupied by your son had a failed furnace. You decided to tell the manufacturer that you were the original owner, when that was not the case. You know that, you did that willfully to obtain about an $800 payment, if my recollection is correct. So, again, do you think this is an appropriate way to do business? We rely on.
So what you're talking about is when you replace the heat box in my house across the street on the failed furnace?
Yeah.
Well,
And I refuse.
can I interrupt for a second? Let's ask questions about, let's ask questions about,
Character, and it's about,
okay,
it's about.
but
what
how
is
about,
right and what
how
kind
about
people
a
that we're
factual
electing to represent
function
our
of the selectman's office? Let's keep it that way instead of trying to do that, okay? No offense or anything, but it's just, it should be. Any questions about the functions of the select board? Yeah,
Scott.
you think you mask off? Yeah.
Yeah, I will. Okay. Scott, sorry. Masked man, yeah, I get
Yeah.
it. The Lone Ranger.
Yeah, but here's the deal. We live in a community where we're
Dan,
supposed to
Dan,
accept
you
masks
mind-
and the man's,
Relax, take it easy.
oh, we can hear you.
Okay,
Keep your mask on.
they can't, okay. There's a couple of things that you touched on in your in your little flyer here that I'd just like to hear your thoughts on. Protecting the waterways and the water supply. Do you think we're not doing that adequately, or is there?
Yes,
something
our
in particular-
reservoir. When I came to town and for the first so many years, up until pretty much COVID time.
Mhm.
There's a setback regulation around the reservoir on Canaan Street Lake that no development Randy, could take within so many feet of that lake to protect that. And then the property was all sold. Because John Zaney bought that property many years ago in anticipation that the town would be going to an artesian well water system, and that would free up that land for development. That land has subsequently been sold, and you see lots in there around our reservoir, for one, and there's what happened. I've been trying to get through DES what that protection area is, because even an artesian well for a town has so many foot radius protected area. Reservoirs have the same thing. After 9/11, all markings for public water sources had to be removed to protect for anybody trying to contaminate. That doesn't remove the boundary. I cannot find the maps. There used to be a map that showed that boundary setback from the water's edge, that nothing can be within that water's edge. And that's why that property across from the old skiway down through there across from Fallsby Road was never developed, because that was all protection area.
I can tell you what those setbacks are. They're 50 feet.
Act 250.
Yeah.
Vermont was the Act
Yeah.
250, which brought it up to 250.
Yeah, and that's one of the things over the last several months that we've been heavily involved in the planning board. And I will say that I was strong opposition for those lots being sold. Myself, and if I recall, 2 other planning board members, may have been more, if there were, thank you. But held the planning board for several meetings to discuss this and try to get proper language and really review so we can deal with these sort of things going forward. But that land that got sold was owned by the town, and it was sold prior to this select board being here. So I had no oversight or no involvement at all with the selling of the land originally, but I did speak up heavily.
I've got nothing against this board. I'm just
No, I
saying
hear you,
that
man,
this
but
is
just
one of
to
the
let
things
you
that
know.
I want to see
But
this
that's what
protection
we're
area
doing.
reinstalled, because we're at maximum levels of chlorination on our water supply.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Well,
It
yeah.
worried me with that.
Right,
Put it there
that
because I said,
protection
Yeah.
area
oh,
is,
geez, okay.
yeah.
And then the
Like-
other question that I have for you, quickly, it's a short one, really. You mentioned working with the other board members on, improving the town's image. So that's a kind of a funny question, but, what do you see as the current town image, and what's your vision for what it should be?
I don't see a bad image. What I would like to see is to me, a town like this should invest in your family businesses. That's what we need here. That's what supports a town, your family businesses. I've heard back when I was on the budget committee many years ago, there are still people, well, if we could get a Market Basket, or if we could get a small Walmart or a subsidy of them in here, that would be wonderful for the town. I don't think so, because as soon as you bring in a large corporate entity, first thing they've got is lawyers trying to figure out how to get out of paying taxes for as many years as they can, because they're coming. And their pricing they can afford, they put the small businesses out. Same thing, this is the whole thing with everybody wants to buy online. If you buy everything online and you don't go to the hardware store, all of a sudden, when you need them, they're not going to be there because they don't have the sales. We need to promote the family businesses in town and try to keep them alive, and that image that we are a town. We're not looking to become a commercial bedroom entity.
Okay, so just in case you don't get elected, or even if you do, you should come and visit us at the Economic Development Committee, because those are the kinds of issues that we're talking about, and it would be helpful to have your thoughts and help on that.
Okay, question in the back, Tom?
Thanks. Second and fourth Mondays, 9 AM at the Community Health Center.
Yeah.
I'd love to have you join. Going back to the water. Dan is absolutely correct. When that came up for the planning board, there were three of us on the planning board who challenged, to the extent we could, challenged, the concern about that property. The state regulations are very, very specific, and they're not that hard to find. In terms of setbacks, and that area inside the reservoir is absolutely a no-touch. You can look, but you can't touch the water. You can't swim, you can't fish, you can't do anything. Regulations are very, very clear. There have been several efforts, including by the person who currently owns it, to try and push the town away from using the reservoir so that that would become more available. My understanding of state law, I have not confirmed this, but my understanding of state law is even if the town chose to just use the wells, that would still be a protected area. So in any case, because of that effort, the current planning board has looked at, if we have a drinking water protection ordinance that the town voted on several years ago. And we are looking at ways to make that, to protect that water supply and all of our waters. So that what you have on your flyer, we're already doing. And again, would love to have you come. The planning board meets the second and fourth Thursdays at 6 o'clock. So.
And
Okay,
which-
last question?
Of which I sit on the planning board and I am involved in revising the Drinking Water Protection Act as we speak. We've been working on it for weeks. We're in the middle of it right now.
Go ahead, last question.
This isn't really a question, it's information. Approximately 20 years ago, the same situation was coming up about that reservoir. Our state representative, I can't remember his name, he was a game warden, a fire warden, and he was blind. He used to come to the meeting.
Peter Sullivan.
He researched it, and once a body of water becomes a reservoir, it's a
It stays.
reservoir forever. You can never change it. It doesn't matter if the town doesn't use that, doesn't matter, because we had the same situation going on.
Enfield Reservoir, which incidentally is in Canaan.
Yeah.
Is no longer connected. Still has to be fenced off, still has to be protected as a reservoir. And this is what I was trying to get out of DES. DES has a whole host of new personnel like they get every year. And I couldn't get an answer. I know what setback
I can give you
regulations.
the names and numbers of two people that, yes, I've spoken to over the course of the last 6 months.
Because I know what, there's setback regulations because I'm working back in private work now and doing septic systems and stuff. And we have to go through setback regulation from water. But I was always told that reservoir is a completely different, you have setback regulations that are even further back than just the lake itself. Because you have your 50-foot, you have your 200-foot on a body of water, but reservoir is even farther to protect it. Nobody would give me that
It's not
measurement.
just the setbacks, it's also the actual body of water you can't go in
Correct.
at all.
Correct.
We actually worked, part of what our goal was when dealing with these subdivisions over there is we worked and actually had them change the language on the plat map. So any potential purchasers of that land would see very clear and obvious, you're buying water frontage property, but you can't use the water.
Yeah.
Because it was referenced to go to this book here, to search to that book to find it. And part of what the three of us worked on was,
Because the
look,
reservoir, you
that
can't-
should be
you can't
stated
swim
right there.
away
So
there.
anybody who buys that property needs to understand, you're not playing in this water.
Is there a barrier around the 200?
There is
On the
not,
land.
no. And it's a weird deal, Vicky. It's the septic setbacks around waterways. I mean, it's just amazing the stuff that I've learned off this planning board in the last almost a year.
So they're selling land that has no visible barrier where they can.
Correct.
Correct.
Wow.
This is,
So one of the things that we proposed, and I think that we can do, but one of the things that we proposed is we wanted to have signage and we plan on working with John Coffey and our water department to put signage up all the way in increments around that reservoir area. So there may not be a physical barrier and the landowner may not see that, even though it's clearly this big in the middle of the plat now. But if nothing else, the town will have signs along that reservoir stating you can't come in here. At this point, as we all know, it's the buoy that goes across that we float out once a year and bring it back in. But that was before we started subdividing, dividing building.
Well, this
lots.
is one of my big concerns.
Right.
You know, the buoy's easy.
Right.
That's across the water. It's
So,
when
I
somebody
share
builds
your
a
concern
house
and
and
we're-
they
and we're
start
already
cutting
doing it.
trees and keep
Right, unfortunately, right.
encroaching.
And I share your concern, and many of us do, and I will say, we're already doing it.
Can I just ask really quickly, since we spent 3 hours on dump trucks tonight?
Yeah.
I just would like to know your positions on the warrant articles to fund, service agencies and, your position on the community center in town for both of you. Please. Very good.
And then we're gonna wrap up after that move on. But you can go, Scott, if you'd like.
As in service, you're talking about as far as advanced transit and them?
Headwise and, yeah, all of the service agencies that help town.
The bulk of them, I think, should just be in our warrant articles every year. It shouldn't, I mean, it should be with the budget. The amount of people that are served in Canaan, it's a good. Back here a few years, must have been 10, 12 years. Anyway, they decided to put everyone in as petition warrant articles. I don't see that reason for it. Far as community center goes, I don't have a problem if they can come up with a viable solution for it. First thing we need to do is create the fund where the money's supposed to be.
So I'd like to put a little plug in for that, kind of a perfect segue. I would like to plug, since how we have a fair amount of people who I'm guessing are gonna hit the voting booth. All of the warrants are obviously important. But there are certain warrants that without them, we can't really move forward and with the plans that have already been put in place by all of us. And, you know, Scott, I read your sheet over. And they are a lot of, almost everything on here is stuff that collectively these boards or committees are already doing, which is awesome, right? It's already happening, but, you know, one of them says, you want to establish a rainy day fund for a year with budget shortfalls. I would refer to everyone to look at Article 15. Article 15 says, establish a contingency fund. We want, you know, Article 6 is the equipment article. Article 7 is additional highway paving funds. Article 10 is the highway capital reserve. So my point is, all of these things that are here, we've already identified and they're up to be voted on this year. So if we
And
want to
that
make a
part-
change in the town of Canaan, we got to get out Tuesday and we got to vote on more.
My bio we had written prior to the warrant articles being published. So-
Understood. I will say this, though, in all
Because warrant
fairness,
articles weren't published until the day of the delivery.
I'll give you that,
So-
Scott, but in all fairness, the meetings are open to the public. And it's been months and months, and anybody who's worked on these committees will tell you countless hours. Put all of this in place already, so they're open to the public, they're available by Zoom, they're on YouTube to review. The meeting minutes are actually taken by a minute taker now, not someone who is heading the meeting, so the minutes are more inclusive of what the meeting actually involves. There are many, many ways where you can get up to speed on what we're already doing.
Okay, so
Just one more question, and that's it. I just-
It's like trial lottery.
You brought up the warrant articles. There's a warrant article in there for bringing the road agent back to elected position.
It's a petition article.
Petition article, but it's on the warrant stuff. What's your thoughts on that?
Personally, I still like an appointed road agent. Because the elected side, we've seen it many years prior, it becomes a popularity race above and beyond abilities. You also have the issue, even if you do a 3-year voted, he's only guaranteed employment for 3 years. How do you go take a 6-year loan to buy a brand new car if you've only got 3 years of employment? How do you buy a house? I mean, it's a lot more stable. I do feel under the appointment that there should be a little better review process.
That's fine, just to speed it along. Thanks,
Yep.
Scott. Dan?
I agree. I feel it should be an appointed position.
All right, what we're gonna do is, wrap it up and we're gonna have, each candidate, give their closing remarks and then, we'll close.
Did we vote tonight?
Absentee.
Yeah, just trying to move it along.
Yeah.
Just trying to move it.
I'm sure both of us would say preferably, yeah.
Gents, we'll do 5 minutes apiece if that's okay.
I shall do my best, but those 3 minutes have turned into 20 minutes sometimes, so bear with me if I go a little over. I sat here quiet for a lot of the night, so, yep. Who wants to start? Go ahead, Scott.
I have no axe to grind with the committee. I just feel that, I have some experience that could improve on where the direction where some of these things have to go and the direction we're headed. And hopefully I've given you some answers tonight. I'd love to have you come out and vote for me, Tuesday. Like I say, I'm not doing this on a personal vendetta. I'm just looking to try to help the town out with what experience I've gained. Working with FEMA, over 20 years of doing public and private evaluations, over 15 years doing the paperwork directly. I worked a lot with Paul Hatch, who was the field man, who actually asked me if I would be willing to work with surrounding towns on paperwork and evaluations. I turned down a chance to apply to FEMA. I didn't want to do if I'm going to travel, I want to see the places pristine. I don't want to see them when they're destroyed. So, I mean, I feel I've got some attributes that will help the town move forward in some of this and experience, and I'd appreciate anybody's vote that wants to give it to me on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mine's probably not quite that quick.
We would expect nothing less.
That's why they call me the long talker, man. Dad always told me the only stupid question is the one you don't ask, right? So, as I said earlier, 3 years ago, when I spoke to the majority of the people in this room and more, you asked me what you could expect of me, and I said transparency and accountability. And that is what I brought. I'm proud of what I've done, my commitment in the last 3 years. Like I said, I did fight to keep Zoom access, to the point where my time on the budget committee wasn't as long-lived as I had hoped, because I ruffled some feathers and they asked me to leave the room. So I did, but we kept Zoom. Right? So, advocated for the select board meetings, more inclusiveness. Like I said, I've spoke with civil engineers. I've talked to those people about grant writing opportunities. I've, hopefully can say that I've led the way on realigning us with the Upper Valley Lake Sunapee Regional Planning Commission. I've brought multiple names and candidates for grant writing opportunities outside of that organization to the select board and our administrator's desk. I've helped secure a contractor, or I did secure a contractor and had the pillars repaired on the library. It was one of the first things that I was actually able to get done. Many of us remember the roof was collapsing, the pillars were failed. It was pulled 1.5 inches away. That's fixed. I developed the RFP and secured a contractor for library repair and painting that's scheduled to start this season. I initiated and took part in inspections of the log cabin property on Depot Street. Our community spent upwards of $100,000 in litigation on that property, and no one had been in the building for years. We had no idea what we were even advocating for. I was the first person to actually find a key for that place and walk through with emergency management directors and chiefs, and we actually did a comprehensive evaluation of that building. I've been part of evaluating our road conditions through on-site visits, public surveys, as well as department head reviews. I've been part of evaluating our gravel conditions, our gravel pit conditions through on-site meetings with engineers, material testing. And we are now in the process of accepting review proposals to go a different avenue so we can start and continue, I should say, with the process that we've started. I'm proud to say that we've paved more road surface in the last year than traditionally done over a several-year time frame. It was a hurdle getting there with funding, and collectively, I keep coming back to this because it is important to realize that there are upwards of 24 people that make these decisions for us. And they do work very hard for our community. And before 3.5 years ago or so, I didn't realize all of the effort that goes into it, and it's a tireless effort on a lot of people. It doesn't come easy. So we identified we didn't have the funds we hoped for, but we still went forward. We paved 2 inches of road. We replaced all the culverts. We ditched that road. We put 1.5 inches of base and 2 inches of top coat. The road should be there for a while. I will tell you, I identified multiple issues throughout the transfer station. And anybody who's been attending the meetings the last 3 years knows that that's something I continually return to, because as a town, we hemorrhage money into the transfer station. I've met with a variety of people over there, from department heads to administration. Most recently, I met with a member of NRRA, National Recycling and Rubbish Association, which did provide us with a proposed plan for a layout of a revised and revamped facility. We're making progress. We need to come up with funding. I found some. There's more. We'll find it. I identified a multiple-page list of violations in our hazardous waste department. I will tell you, I walked into the office and the 2 gentlemen were in there reviewing it with our previous administrator. And I sat down at the meeting and went over it, and I led the charge and pushed and pushed and pushed. And if you ask any of the guys that were involved in cleaning it up, they know I was pushing, and we got it cleaned up before we got fined. I have met with the auditors. I've had the auditors come in here. It's transparency. The assessors have been in here. It's transparency. The water department engineers, the Goose Pond Dam engineers, the bridge replacement and funding engineers to give us replacement and cost schedules many times. I have met with FEMA many times, multiple times, sat in the office over with them more than once, on-site visits with them. Have I filled paperwork out for FEMA funding? No. That's what our administrator is for. It's not my job. It's my job to oversee that it does get filled out and that we pursue it. I've sat through multiple emergency management development meetings right here at this EOC with the entire management development team, the state management team on Zoom, reviewing our evacuation sites, cooling facilities, heating facilities, food pantries, clothing facilities. I will tell you that I am proud to say that I was one of the people that got called in the middle of the night this past winter when we had a situation and we needed to figure out where everybody was going to go for heating if that became the case. I took the call happily. It's what I'm here for. It's why I sit in on the meetings. I've been involved in the process. A few things that you people should know. Some information for you. We've updated the server in the town office for the first time in somewhere around 20 years, from what I understand, but no one really remembers exactly how long it's been. We've updated the Wi-Fi at the town office, so we're not connected to one of the local businesses when you go in and run your credit card transactions anymore, because that's where we were hooked up to, was a nearby business for our Wi-Fi. That's been rectified. We have worked directly with our finance director to operate our finance and payroll systems at our town office, so our employees actually see on their checks their vacation time accrued. If they work in Vermont, they actually have taxes taken out, and we've stopped the steady line of employees in our finance director's office asking these questions so she can be more productive with her time. We've consolidated as many as 14 bank accounts that we had collected, and they collected virtually no interest at all. And after consolidating those accounts, we are now generating between $12,000 and $15,000 a month in revenue. The stuff just doesn't happen. It's from all of us digging in and looking at these things. Where is our money going, Dan? Right? Where are our taxes going? This is stuff that we've been doing and I've been a part of. I've worked with the finance director to bring the unassigned fund balance up to the Department of Revenue Administration suggested percentage. I think a lot of people don't realize that the DRA recommends that you have between a 5 and 8% slush fund balance in your unassigned fund. I'm not sure that the previous board knew that, and I don't think it was out of intent not to be informed. I don't think they were made aware of that. In 2019, our unassigned fund balance was $150,000+ in the red. We brought it up. We've got the percentage in there. This is a collective effort, and it's stuff that I've been working on the last 3 years, and I'm asking you to support me in working on it for the next 3. I've worked with our emergency services department to finalize their business plan for our interfacility transport that we all voted on several years ago to buy a new ambulance. And then we bought the ambulance and the program never got finalized and put in place, and the ambulance sat over there. And in the last year and a half, Stephen and I started the charge sitting right there. And then Sadie come on board and we kept going, and now that the program's up and working. The ambulance doesn't just sit there anymore. I'm proud of that progress.
John Hennessy and Lorraine Hennessy had a lot to do with that.
I couldn't agree more. John was sitting at the table with us when we discussed it, Lorraine, 100%.
Press the vote, the go button on that, we set the deadline.
Understand, and it wasn't put into place, but my point is, I'm happy to be part of it, and we implemented it. It didn't just sit there anymore. We're being involved. You know, one of the things we've recently identified is the fact that our water fees that our users pay don't even cover the cost associated with the water department. It's something that's been mentioned for the last 3 or 4 budget cycles, but nothing's ever done about, and now we're working with municipal resources actively, day by day, to rectify the problem and figure out how we fix that without sending all of our water users into a frenzy. It's happening. I literally could go on, and I'll tell you, that's just some of my involvement with the select board alone, not to mention the capital improvement committee that I sat on. And I'll tell you, in my opinion, why our capital improvement committee was all over the place, because we were basing our capital revenues and our revenue accounts and our purchases off 3 different criteria. We were looking at some off an interest percentage. We were looking at some of the purchases we needed to foresee off current value, and we were looking at some of the capital revenue off forecasted value. So we had 3 different avenues that we were trying to base our capital improvement plan off. And all that added up to was never actually putting enough money in there to buy the thing. There are people in this room that have heard me over and over and over say, I feel like we're holding our money hostage, because by the time that 5th or 6th year gets there to buy it, there's not enough money. So you can't do anything else with it because it's allocated for that, but we don't have enough money to buy it. So we changed that. We actively identified it and worked to change it. It's happening. We're doing this. We're currently, so look, the first year I was a select board representative, the previous administration literally sent me on wild goose chases. The second year, we welcomed a new board member in Stephen Freeze, and it was a learning curve for both of us. Quite frankly, I'm not sure we knew where the other person really stood on the issues we faced. But over a year's time, with a chairman that had checked out of the process, admittedly, Stephen and I dug in and worked together to move us forward. The beginning of my 3rd year, we welcomed a new board member in Sadie Wells, and I'm very relieved and proud to say that we now have a select board that works for our community 7 days a week. We're getting the job done. And I'm going to end it with the same thing I said earlier. We're moving our town forward. I'm a firm believer, especially now, it's the same paragraph I read earlier. I am a firm believer, especially now being involved in the process, that after the first 3 years, you really have just gained enough knowledge to be able to put it into the test. And as many of you have heard me say, I don't think you need to be here forever either. I'm asking for 3 more years so we can take what we're working on collectively, take the knowledge that I've learned, and continue the process. I appreciate everybody who supported me 3 years ago, and I hope I've kept your support, and I hope I've earned other people's support as well. And please, everyone, get out and vote Tuesday. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night. Drive safe. Be safe.
See you Tuesday, everybody.